Over 4 months, including weeks of Nancy Pelosi holding on to the articles of impeachment once they were passed, hoping for some kind of smoking gun, with that gun never appearing, ends us where we are today, on the cusp of a senatorial acquittal. We will soon be rid of this turbulent priestess of impeachment. Here's what I would say. First, if I may, there is a long-established and recently forgotten legal doctrine known as unclean hands. In short, to quote one legal dictionary, the claim bars relief to a party who is engaged in inequitable behavior, including fraud, deceit, unconscionability, or bad faith, related to the subject matter of that party's claim. Let's focus on bad faith for a moment. We have been told over and over again since September that the President of the United States put in jeopardy and harmed our national security by delaying the delivery of aid to Ukraine, lethal aid they'd never before received. Now, focus on a few names of the impeachment managers selected to prosecute the case against President Trump in the Senate, members of the House who voted for impeachment and whose responsibility is to argue for Trump's conviction. Start with Hakeem Jeffries, then add Zoe Lofgren, then Jerry Nadler. Aside from Adam Schiff, perhaps the 3 most prominent House managers. They are 3 of the 7. In other words, 43% of the prosecution. Guess what? Each and every one of them voted against sending aid to Ukraine in the case at bar. In House Resolution 5515, the aid at issue in the impeachment of Donald Trump. The vote took place last year, and yes, Donald Trump held on to it for 5 weeks once it was passed. But those who think he put our national security at risk by delaying the delivery of aid by 5 weeks never wanted the aid to flow in the first place. They voted against sending any aid at all, ever. If Donald Trump was putting national security at risk by holding aid for 5 weeks, what say this court of impeachment about prosecutors who never wanted that aid to flow at all, who voted against it en toto? Physician, heal thyself doesn't even come close to working here. Hypocrisy is not a strong enough statement. Perpetrating a political fraud on the American people comes a lot closer. Nearly half of the prosecution of Donald Trump acted worse than he did on the very subject matter they are trying to impeach him for. He delayed. They permanently tried to deny. They should be fully ignored or seen as unserious political hucksters at a minimum. Second, you really do get the import of impeachment when you think of what it does. It removes a duly elected official from office and deprives him or her of the opportunity to ever run for that office again, ever. It is of consequence, it's of such consequence, it's been attempted against a president only 3 other times in our history, with President Johnson, with Richard Nixon, and with Bill Clinton. The Senate acquitted each of them, and Nixon's case never got so far because of his resignation. But is anyone here going to tell me that the delay of lethal aid to Ukraine, a country few have heard of, a country begging of Barack Obama to give them lethal aid where he refused every time, is anyone here going to tell me this rises to anything close to Andrew Johnson upending Abraham Lincoln's vision of Reconstruction and violating laws that Congress specifically passed to stop him from doing? That it rises to anything close to Richard Nixon trying to cover up the literal breaking into the Democratic Party's headquarters with former FBI and CIA officials and agents? That it rises to anything close to Bill Clinton literally committing perjury and obstruction of justice in a civil rights lawsuit that the Supreme Court said should move forward against him? Nobody could pass such a laugh test asking these questions. There were no violations of law here. No violating Congress's direct mandates in law. No breaking into political opponents' headquarters with the apparatuses of state. No violations of a woman's civil rights. Now, I ask you that just as this comes to us 9 months before an election before the American people. If what Donald Trump did was so wrong, why cannot the people be trusted to decide for themselves how wrong it was and whether it was worthy of removing him from office? A week ago, Adam Schiff said this issue was too important and too urgent to let the people decide for themselves. If delaying military aid to Ukraine is too important for the American people to decide, can someone tell me what could be of import enough to let them actually vote on? Really, nearly half his team of prosecutors wanted to fully deny aid to Ukraine, and Schiff is saying delaying it is too important to trust with the American people. I believe Adam Schiff has impeached himself, his own credibility, and by usurping the democratic processes as well as democracy itself. Now, ask yourselves one big important thing about all of this. Why does conviction of impeachment require a supermajority? A two-thirds vote of the U.S. Senate rather than a simple majoritarian vote. Because conviction of impeachment is a big thing. It's the death penalty of politics. It's severe punishment. It requires consensus of some standard greater than 51%, greater than more likely than not, greater than a preponderance of the evidence. A standard less, perhaps, than beyond a reasonable doubt, but certainly a supermajority standard, perhaps somewhere along the line of clear and convincing evidence. At a minimum, that means what Nancy Pelosi said it meant less than a year ago when she said, quote, "Impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country," close quote. Quite right. That's why the founders required a supermajority to vote for it. So how we doing here by the founders' test, by the Pelosi test? Well, not a single Republican in the House voted for the articles of impeachment, not one. And two Democrats voted against the impeachment articles. If there was any bipartisanship at all, if there was any crossover, if there was any consensus, it was against impeachment. The country is clearly, however, divided. Is that a good time to deprive them of their vote and to superimpose Democratic Party operatives' judgment in the place of the American people when every other test of impeachment, according to Nancy Pelosi, has failed? It is divisive. It's not compelling. It's not overwhelming. And any bipartisanship is against, not for, impeachment. And yet, given all this, including Adam Schiff's statement that this is too important for people to be trusted to vote upon, given all this, including about a 50-50 divide in America on this, one party wants to raise Cain to remove the president without a vote of the people, which they would get in 9 months. 50% of the country doesn't want this. Perhaps 50% does. And they have the audacity to say Donald Trump is interfering in an election? They're the ones trying to stop one. Think on that. Finally, we are told again and again nobody is above the law, least of all the president. Fine. Who can argue with that? But then where in the wild, wild world of sports or anywhere else did the House of Representatives charge a violation of the law? They did not. They charged abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Not treason, not bribery, not violation of any other provision in the entirety of the U.S. Code. Not one. But they know one thing well. They know investigating Joe Biden and his son for corruption, as Donald Trump said he wanted to do, is the reason they claim he was trying to interfere in an election. Because Joe Biden is running for the presidency. Okay. So if the president cannot investigate someone for corruption, any one person, let's call him Billy Budd for all I care, the president can have investigated anyone but Billy Budd. What would that tell you? That Billy Budd is above the law? No. If investigating one person is a violation of your office, that person is immune from investigation. But Joe Biden is that one person. It was he who bragged about a quid pro quo, the definition of engaging in a quid pro quo. He bragged and was proud of telling the leadership of Ukraine they would not get financial aid unless they took the official action of firing a state prosecutor. Quid pro quos, supposedly a terrible thing, Democrats tell us. And it turns out that prosecutor had some authority over the business doings of Joe Biden's son. Would that not warrant even a de minimis inquiry as to propriety? In fact, Donald Trump, and if in fact Donald Trump Jr. was making money from a Russian company in 2015 or 2016, let's say, and Barack Obama ordered an investigation into Trump Jr.'s activities, would anyone blink an eye? The Trumps, after all, are not above the law, right? They aren't even above being lied about by an opposing campaign that creates a fake dossier that goes to the FBI, evidently. So what have we here? After all is said and done, what have we here? We have exactly this. Yes, somebody is above the law, and that somebody is Joe and Hunter Biden. There is lawlessness here. There is malfeasance here. There is contempt for our elections here. There is abuse of process and contempt of not just Congress, but democracy here. It's just that it's all of it, every bit. It's all from the Democrats. This case should be dismissed with prejudice, and sanctions should be levied. I'm Seth Leibsohn. We'll be right back. I'd like to take a moment to tell you about my friends at Guns Etc. They are true American patriots. They strongly support our president, and they have over 10,200 square feet of firearms and firearm accessories. Please take my advice and stop by their store, which is a symbol of American freedom, or visit them at gunsetcetera.com and have access to over $350 million in firearms merchandise.